Online for Authors, I am chatting with Mark Sowersby, author of Forgiving the Nightmare. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be with you.
I am super excited to have you. Before we really get into the book, why don't you give like a quick little elevator pitch? When someone opens up the cover, they're going to start to read, and what are they going to find in those pages?
Well, the first thing I hope they find is hope. That's what we think Forgiving the Nightmare is about. Hope, faith, love, grace. They're going to find a story that too many of us share, a story of a trauma, a nightmare. However that nightmare came into your life, my nightmare was child abuse. But I know there's countless traumas, nightmares, hurts, and pains. And in that book, I hope they find a journey that I went on, a journey of faith, a journey of hope that brought me to a healthy place, to bring me to a place to really be able to forgive those who trespass against me. I tried to be very honest. I was very honest, genuine, true. The story is not about abuse. It's about forgiveness and what forgiveness looks like and sounds like and feels like, and the times we want to give up and surrender. So if you open up that book, I really hope you find hope.
Wonderful. What made you decide that you wanted to write this all down?
Wow, it's funny. It's funny you ask that, because I am not an author by enjoyment. I'm an author by discipline. And I'll back that up by letting you know that as somebody who grew up in dysfunction and abuse, one of the casualties of me growing up was my education.
Right.
And one of those education things was I'm a dyslexic. I still am a dyslexic. I long for the miracle to come one day, but I still am a dyslexic. And when God told me to put it on my heart through the grace of God and to write a book, I thought, well, I can't write a book. And there I was, and it finally came out probably about 30 years after I felt that first twinge. But we finally put pen to paper. Now, I married a girl who had more colors and Latin names around her neck when she graduated than anything I could ever imagine. So she really helped me. We found a great editor and publisher, and he became my writing coach. I wanted to strangle him and hug him at the same time,
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's been a great discipline. It's been a great, I love to write now, but when I first came to this, I didn't know how to make a compound sentence. I didn't know where a period. I didn't know but thank God for editors. Praise God for them.
Absolutely, absolutely. You say God put it on your heart to write this story. I'm just curious. There are a lot of people who have been through a lot of things, as you said, and not everyone writes a book. In fact, very few of people who have been through any kind of trauma actually put it down in book format. What do you think it is that made you have to write this book?
Well, again, I think that the book, again, is not just about me.
Right.
It's about me sharing this story. And I wanted others to find the freedom that I found. See, I tell people I didn't start this journey off writing a book or walking through grace or learning to forgive or finding healing. I didn't start this journey off because I'm such a good guy. See, I was broken. I was messed up. I was afraid. I was confused. I was dysfunctional. And I stumbled into a church that people loved on me and showed me the way, taught me the goodness of God. And in that broken and mixed up part of my life, I just started to seek the Lord. I said, Lord, if you're real, if you're really there, if you're good, and all those things that one would say when they first come to God. So this journey is not just about me learning to forgive. It's really started with me seeking the Lord, and the Lord would bring me to forgiveness. And that's what I want to share. My perspective wasn't, look, hey, I'm going to do this so I can be. My perspective was, I want to seek the Lord, and I know that's where my grace and peace will come from. And in that is where God would bring me through a journey to forgive. So I want to just share with real people. I want to share it in a real way. It's not so high that nobody can read it. I hope it's not so low that nobody wants to read it. I think it's a genuine and honest story about a guy who went through a journey that said, now there's hope and peace.
Right. The book definitely focuses on forgiveness. I mean, that's kind of like the main crux at the end, is that's where we're going for. Why do you think forgiveness is so important, just to people in general?
Sure. Well, you'll have me put on my pastor hat a little bit.
No, do that. That's fine. Yeah.
So my pastor hat says this, I come to faith and the Lord tells me to forgive.
Right.
right? We see it in the prayer. Help us forgive those who trespass against us. We know other places in the scripture it says, well, if you can't forgive them, how can your heavenly Father forgive you? And, I wrestled with those scriptures, even through Bible college, even the first couple of years in the pulpit. I would put, I'd make excuses, well, Lord, you don't really mean that kind of stuff. You mean the guy who cuts you off or the person who owes you $5, but you don't mean those life-altering offenses and pains. You didn't tell me to just forgive them. You'll understand. And praise God, God did understand me in that place. But his grace was good. His mercy came to me. His spirit led me. His word filled me. And in that place is where I wanted to write and say, forgiveness really set me free. I wasn't letting the other person off the hook. Forgiveness set me free. There's 3 principles I learned about forgiveness that really changed my mind. And the first one is that forgiveness is not approval. Just because you forgive somebody, you're not approving of their offense, their action, their sin. You're not saying that's okay. You can say, I forgive you, and what you did was wrong. These 2 things can exist at the same time. So the first thing I thought, well, if I forgive, I'm letting them off the hook. I want my pound of flesh. I want my revenge. But God would bring me to a place where I could understand that I could forgive and still seek him. He also would take me to a place where I realized that forgiveness isn't a one-time event, that forgiveness is oftentimes every day his mercies are made new. So there's those moments when the triggers rise up and those familiar pains try to rush in. But I remember by the grace of God, I forgave. And the third thing really helped me is that I could have my boundaries. I didn't, I could have those walls, if you would, I could say, I could have my boundaries. And I think those 3 principles really helped me learn to forgive and be able to say, I can forgive like that by the grace of God.
Yeah, I think that forgiveness is something a lot of people struggle with just in general, because you do have that feeling like, well, if I forgive them, then I have to let them back into my life. Or if I forgive them, then I have to forget everything that they've done. Or if I forgive them, that means that what they did really wasn't that bad after all. And none of those things are true, but it's really difficult sometimes to get past all of that false idea about what forgiveness actually means. What I loved when you said is that forgiveness was more for you. It has very little to do with the person or persons that hurt you. And it has everything to do with letting yourself no longer be bound by that hurt.
That's right.
When you forgive someone, I've noticed in my own life, I mean, there are definitely things you have to forgive. And sometimes, and I liked how you said it was a process and that you have to kind of keep doing it over and over, because I can look, there's one in particular, I won't get into it, but there's one in particular, and I can forgive about, right now I'm at about 70%, where there are certain aspects that I really do feel that I have forgiven. And then you can click on a particular button and it's like, not there. Nope, I haven't forgiven that yet. And I'm still working on it. And I understand that it's a process and it's a journey, and, hopefully I will get to that point where I can say, okay, we're nearing 100% here and I'm doing pretty good. But yeah, I like that.
And that's why I called the book Forgiving, right? I didn't say forgive, I forgive it, because it is that process.
Yeah.
It is that one to learning to die to self, to seek the Lord, to not allow those things of the past to control the things of the future. And you're right, there's those waves, those moments, those triggers, those sounds, those smells, when we think it's all tucked away, all in a safe place. It come bubble. Yeah, sure. And of course, it's because I wrote a book doesn't mean I don't have those moments. And I think that's what I talked about in the book is, what do I do in those moments?
Exactly.
How do I work through those to still be a person of integrity, still carry my faith, but still also know that I have feelings and I've cried and I've been hurt.
And you're not perfect. And that will come up, right?
That's right.
I call that stuff, I call it my swamp gas. It's when the little bubbles whoop, 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 and up they pop, and it's like, oh, where did that come from? And then you have to start and kind of heal from that point. So you have it broken into like 3 parts. And part 1 is your story. And so that's your story of growing up and the abuse and just how you got to the place that you got before you started your journey of forgiveness. Part 2 is trail markers. And so I want you to kind of tell me what do you mean by trail markers? And then, yeah, let's just talk a little bit about
Sure.
that
Well,
area.
I use the term trail markers as a metaphor. I do like to hike. Now, I'm not
Mhm.
an Everest kind of hiker. That's obvious, but I don't mind going out on a trail and kind of hit the backwoods for a little bit. It's got to be well marked. You got to know where you're going, and I enjoy that. I like being out in nature, and anybody that hikes knows you have to follow the trail. And I'm sure every state, every county, everybody identifies their trails with different kind of markers, but it's important to know what trail you're following
Right.
because it's easy to get lost and so distracted. And sometimes two or three trails can come together as one. So if you're on the blue trail and blue and black and green all come together, are you still following the trail that you're on? So I use that as a metaphor to say these are kind of steps. Every time I'm traveling, I look. Am I still on the right path? Am I still
Right.
going the way I want to go? Am I still going to end up where I hope to end up? And I use that illustration with kind of 10 principles that I put in my book to really just say, am I still on the path? Is the old man rising up? Is the old things getting louder? Are those old familiar pains just starting to overtake me again? Or am I still living by the principles that I set for myself by the grace of God, not in perfection, but in love? Am I still striving? Am I still
Right.
calling upon those things? So that's what I meant by the trail markers, because I just didn't want to be a memoir like, hey, here's Mark, and I went through this stuff. Well, big deal, Mark. We've all been through stuff. But
Right.
here's some tools that help me heal, help me
Right.
go forward. And that's what I wanted to give the reader.
Right. And I like that idea that of the trail marker where you're looking back and making sure you're in that on that path. Because even though you've written the book and even though you now have this idea of what you need to be doing, it's easy to get jerked off the path.
Oh, sure. Sure. Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
so easy. I just wrote a book about 10 little rules for a double-butted adventure, and it's things you're supposed to do for like living an adventurous life, whatever that means to you, like getting outside of your box and living a little bigger and bolder. And I've written the book. I've been on an incredible adventure where I rode across the United States on a tandem bicycle, and yet I still forget my 10 rules. And every now and then you have to look and go, oh yeah, oh, Terry, you're not doing that anymore. So when looking at these 10 principles of, forgiveness or going toward forgiveness, is there one in particular that stands out to you the most?
Well, I think it's very important. All of them spoke to me, but what I really touched my heart is one that I call from victim to victory.
Okay.
That was one that really spoke to me. It's true. It's a part of my narrative that I was abused and I was molested and sold to others and beaten and stabbed, and the ugliness of all that. That's a true part of my story. As much as I wish it didn't happen, it will always be a part of my
Right.
story. It will never go away. That was a part of my narrative. And we can sit here and point figures and go, why, how, if, what, and of course I've done all that. But I don't want the worst part of my day, the worst part of my life, to be the sum of my life. I don't
Right.
want that hurt and that pain and that rejection and all that I went through to be what identifies me. So the victory that I have now, I believe it's through Christ. It's through my faith. It's through the love of God. That's my victory. So that's what I want to be known as today. Not just the worst part of my life. Yes, it happened. I don't pretend it went away. Yes, it was a part of my life. It shaped me, and of course, it did. All this ugliness, of course, but that's not who I am. Who I am is somebody that I'm a husband, married to a great girl. I'm a father. I'm a local pastor. I'm a speaker. I'm an author. I can't believe that. I pay the high gas prices like everybody else.
Yeah.
Still paid $6 for eggs, just like every. So what am I? I'm just a regular guy. I'm not just this person with this
Right.
ugly background and experience. Now I have victory, and that victory is in Jesus because of what He's done for me.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that idea that something that happened to us doesn't have to define
Amen.
everything about us.
That's right.
I was in an emotionally abusive relationship for 14 years, and it definitely shaped me and it definitely changed the way I thought about things. But it isn't who I am.
That's right.
It is a thing that happened to me.
That's right.
And
That's right.
then like you, I have my list of things that I actually am, and that one was just, it was something that happened to me. And you don't get rid of it, but you can find a way to forgive it. And
Sure.
that's what
That's
and
right.
that's what your book talks about. And I like that.
Thank you.
Um, Hope is something that you said you want people to really gain. Is there anything else, like, someone right now who's listening, who maybe has been through some trauma that they need to learn to forgive? They're going to pick up this book, and you want them to take away hope. What else do you want them to take with them?
Well, I'll say this. I think that when we've gone through traumas, life altering traumas, and I want to be very gentle here because I know I just have my little uh, stuff I've walked through, and there's so much that people have carried
Right.
deaths and sorrows and addictions. And I can't even fathom the pain of some people have walked through. But I'll say that traumas like to isolate us. Traumas tell us we're the only one. Traumas say, you're the only one who's ever been through this. Nobody will understand. There's nobody for you. It isolates us to a place of oftentimes just listening to our own heads that have been wounded. It hurts. So
Right.
it's this circular reasoning, and we stay away from people and we shun people and we don't go to church and we don't want to talk to the preacher and hey, we don't trust anybody. And I get it. I was there. But that isolation really, really can crush people. And I would say that I hope in my book, people will find there's voices in this community of trauma. There's voices where people have gone and said, "Hey, I'm not perfect, and I'm still trying to figure out. But what I've already figured out, I want to pass on." And I
Right.
think that's what I hope that my book's about. That will take that person who says, I'm isolated, I'm afraid. I get to speak on this often. And I was speaking out last year, and I was talking about forgiveness. I was talking about forgiving abuse and hurts and pains and sorrows. And in our faith circle, we open the altars. People come and pray at the altars. And a woman came up at the altar at the end of service, and she asked me to pray for her. There was tears coming down her face, and she was probably in her late 70s. Her grown children were around her, and her grandchildren were around her. And she looked at me and she said, "Pastor, I went through the same thing you went through." And it was the first time she spoke of it. In
Yeah.
how many years? 50 years, 40? But it was the first, and it just was pouring out of it. Imagine burying that down for so long, and then it just pours out. And I think that's what trauma does. Like if I tell, people think I'm a fool. If they tell, they'll think I'm weak. If I share, they won't understand. They'll mock me. Why weren't you strong enough? Why did you say no? Why didn't you run away? Why did you do that? So it's
Why
that.
did you stay? Why did you all the things, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So
Yeah.
so I think that my book, I want to say, hey, listen, if you're looking for perfection, read the Bible. Right? But if but if you want to hear a voice that's it's been there's maybe some people you've been and want to give you a hand up and share with you a little hope, maybe a laugh, maybe a tear, then I invite you to read Forgiven the Nightmare.
Yeah, I love that idea. I know that when I was in my abusive relationship, I felt very isolated and was very afraid to tell anyone what was actually happening for all of those reasons. And I've learned since I'm out of this relationship and I do talk about it. I talk about it to anyone who will listen to me talk, that the more you bring it into the light, the teeth go away. It's no longer this scary monster.
That's right.
It
That's right.
becomes kind of toothless. And part of that is because the number of people who've come up to me and said, "Me too."
Oh, sure.
I've had something similar, or, I didn't have that, but I had this.
That's
And I
right.
felt that way too. And so I do love that idea of this bringing it out into the light. I think that the more people share, the more they can recognize that the abuse doesn't have to define them and that there is life beyond,
That's right. That's right.
right?
That's
Whatever the
right.
trauma is, there is life beyond that trauma.
That's right. That's right. And like I said, we'll find the coping mechanisms.
Right.
I mean, there's counselors, there's coaches, there's pastors, there's teachers, there's all kinds of people that we can come beside and have people in our journey. I didn't do this isolated. I did this
Right.
with people on my side. I had people that supported me, listened to me. loved me, gave me a good hug when I needed it, gave me a good swift kick when I needed it
Really?
too, because they loved me. And, and that's what this journey is about. So
Absolutely. So you're not a writer,
not.
but then you decided that you kind of liked the writing. Do you have any other books planned? I'm just curious. Do you have
We do. We
anything else coming?
just released. My wife and I wrote a second book together. So it's my second
Uh-huh.
book, and we wrote it, and it's called Letters to the Weary. Jesus said, "If you're tired and weary, come to me, and I'll give you
Right.
rest." And so we wrote a 21-day devotional. Got to wear the pastor hat. And she shared some reflections, stories, testimonies, scriptures to help people say, "Okay, I hear what you're saying, Mark. I've forgiven. I've walked through this. That person that once had so much control for me, I let it go. I gave it to God, but I got to go to work Monday, and
I'm
I got to do
exhausted,
other,
right?
yes, yeah. I had that moment. Oh, but now what do I do? How do I live that moment?" And that's what we hope that we find in our second book. We're kind of just that devotional to encourage those people, saying, "Hey, listen, there's hope in the battle. There's hope. I know you want to give up, throw in the towel, but God is there. Grace is there." And that's so our second book is called Letters to the Weary.
Fantastic. What I love about that is here in the very beginning when we were chatting, you were like, I am not an author. They like forced me into it. And here you've got a second one. I have a feeling, and maybe I'm wrong, but I bet you even have a third idea. Am I right?
I let me put it this, I never thought I was an author. That was one of the
Right.
lies of my
Exactly.
trauma.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you know, yeah, that
That you
was what
can't.
that I can't exactly.
Right.
This dyslexic special ed kid who went to school in a small bus. There wasn't an IEP plan. There's this kid that had all the system working. Hey, you'll never be a writer. You don't understand that. You're special ed English. You're special ed. How could you ever do that? But through healing, through victories, my publisher, my editor, he always rebukes me when I tell him I'm not a writer. He goes, "Mark, for not a writer, you have 2 books published.
Yeah.
That's a pretty
Yeah.
good writer." And
That's a
and yeah,
pretty
you're
that's a
right.
pretty good non-writer.
Yeah, it was a discipline,
Mhm.
but now it's turned into a love, and I do enjoy putting pen to paper and kind of letting my creativeness, my passion, my faith
Right.
pour out. I'm writing more than I ever have, and only some of the stuff got put into the book. So
So I'm curious, you've done now a memoir, creative nonfiction memoir. You've now done the, um, what did you call it?
devotional,
Devotional. My mind just went
that's
blank.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it happens to me a lot. The devotional. Have you ever thought of writing anything in the fiction genre, or do you think that you'll always stay with a nonfiction?
Well, I all these things are so new to me. And even to hear that question, I put a smile to my face. What genre do you think you're going to write in, Mark? I mean, wow, Mark's being so
Whoa, Mark writes
yeah,
genre.
Mark. Right now, I think that the next thing I'd love to do is be able to write a curriculum. I
Uh-huh.
think that I'd like to be able to say, hey, come to a seminar. Here's some steps. We could take the big picture, the million mile view, and say, break it down. I tried to do that with Letters to the Weary, but I'd
Yeah.
really like to maybe write a curriculum. I can also see myself possibly writing like a leadership book, because
Yeah.
imagine when you come from dysfunction, insecurity, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart
Right.
enough,
Right.
and now you're in charge. And how does that happen? And the insecurity. So I'd like to maybe write a leadership book on that. But yeah, I could see myself. I told my kids stories. I've stolen from Token a bunch of times and how to tell stories. So maybe someday there might be a fictional character or something out there. You never know. It's kind of like I'm like a kid in the candy store, and I've never had this open to me. Remember when I went to writing, all the anxiety of the discipline and the academic would just turn me away. And
Right.
somebody just said, "Write." Well, what do you mean? I don't know how to write. Just write. Don't
That's
care
right.
if it's spelt okay. Don't care how long, if you got a sentence without a period. That's why we pay handsomely editors. They said
Right.
so. So that's what I started to do. I just started to write. Forgiven the Nightmare, I would say the first original raw draft that my wife and I put together before sending it out anyway we probably, because it just kind of poured out of me, we
Right.
probably wrote that in about a week. The first, and then of course it
Yeah.
got
Right. Right.
refined, and more was given. But that first urge, that first popping out was probably wrote because it just was like right there. It's like right in my soul, and it just had to be poured out. You know.
So you may not like this term, but what I call that is word vomit. And that's the way I'll write, where all of a sudden I'm compelled. Like it's here and it needs, and I just write and I write and I write and I don't worry. When I first look at that first draft that I wrote and I take a look at it, whew, it's not great. I mean, it needs a lot of work. It's just what was in my head at that moment. And then you have to go back and do all of the things that massage it into something that you would show to someone. So it
Sure.
sounds to me like you are absolutely an author. I mean, you even do the there it is, and now we have to work on it
Well, I
phase.
do
So
the book really, really well.
is that good? You're good. You're really good at that part,
I'm
huh?
really good at that. That's right. And I've heard it said by songwriters or musicians. It's kind of comes on you like the muse, and this
Yeah.
thought will turn into a phrase, and I'll write it down in a notebook, and I'll say, "Boy, where can I explore that? Can I? Is that
Yeah.
the seed that something bigger is going to come out of?" So, that's kind of where we're at writing. So, yeah, when I came in again. Writing for me was definitely a discipline. Every insecurity, Mark, a writer, what? I can't. But now I think that I really enjoy it. And people tell me they enjoy reading my
Yeah.
writing, which is even more of a miracle. So
I think the reason people enjoy reading it though is because it's honest.
thank
The
you.
honesty. There are a lot of people who write and they write a book like this, and it doesn't feel honest. It feels contrived. It feels like we've made 10 steps and we know the 10 steps and there are no others. There's never an 11th and there's never only nine. And you must follow these 10 absolutely because I know what I'm talking about. And that isn't the way your book feels. Your book feels very much like here's 10 things I discovered that helped me along the way. And I found them to be something that continue to help me because I'm still figuring it all out. But these are the 10 at the moment. And it has more of that flavor to it, which if I'm going to read a book that is in any way considered self help, I don't want the person who's telling me what to do to be so sure of themselves that they think they have the only answer. I've lived long enough to know that there are a lot of ways to get something done. And I
Yeah,
want enough leeway to be able to say, well, I'm going to do these 10, but I'm going to do them in a different order.
that's right.
And I have an 11th one that I really need. You know what I'm
That's right.
saying? I
That's
like
right.
that. And when I read yours, it felt more that way.
Well, you're very
Like,
kind. Thank you so much. And that was my heart. I never want to stand above people pointing my finger and saying I know everything. I want to say,
right.
hey, here's some things. I
It
think
helps
in
me. I hope it helps you, right?
yeah, that's right. I think in the community of trauma, there's a language, if you would, that people that have gone through these nightmares. There's a familiar language that some people can articulate well, and some people can just feel it. And I think when I speak out, I could realize in a couple minutes that I'm speaking. I can connect with people that have unfortunately walked through their own pains and hurts. And you can see pretty quickly how many people are hearing you from just listening to you. And
Right.
when they're listening and hearing, they're those people that share this unfortunate pain that we've all had, this cross that we've all had to bear for one reason or another. There's hope in that community when you find somebody who says, "Hey, come here. There's a way out over here." And and
I
that's what
found
I
some
hope.
light over on this side.
Yeah,
Come
that's
over,
right.
yeah.
That's right. And that's what we hope. That's what I hope to bring to this community is not when saying, "Hey, Mark knows everything,"
Right.
um,
Right.
but one saying, "Hey, guess what? I found a way." And if hey, I don't have to be trapped anymore or shackled, or I don't have to wake up hating myself. I don't have to
Right.
wake up feeling on the least of everything. I don't have to wake up thinking, I had no self-confidence. I had no, the abuser stole everything from me. He stole my dignity, my value. He took his pound of flesh, obviously, but he stole so much more that
Right.
left me insecure and frightful of my own shadow. So I found hope, and I found strength, and I found peace. I found it through Christ, and I want to share that with others.
Fantastic. If someone wanted to reach out to you, talk with you about this book, new books you're writing, just talk to you because they want to share with you, how do they do that? How do they get?
Well, the best way to get a hold of me is go to our website at forgivingthenightmare.com. Forgivingthenightmare.com. There you can shoot me an email at mark@forgivingthenightmare. Mark@forgivingthenightmare. I'm on all the social pages. I'm on Facebook. My kids say I'm old because I'm a lot on Facebook, but I'm also on Instagram, and I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm on Twitter. So I think X. I'm on X. So
Yeah.
you can reach out to me those ways. Mark, Forgiving the Nightmare. Those are the ways to find out about our books. Both of our books are on Amazon. Forgiving the Nightmare and Letters to the Weary. So anybody wants to check it out there. But forgivingthenightmare.com.
Super. And I'll have all of that in the show notes, guys. So, Mark, I want to thank you so much for being with me today. I really, really appreciated chatting with you about this book.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It was an honor to be with you, and God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.